Welcome to another edition of Around the Town with Hez Brown. And now your host, Hezekiah Brown.
Hello, and welcome to another edition of Around the Town with Hez Brown. Remember, we want your feedback. Send your comments and ideas by email to WRVS-FM@gmail.com. Let's get to the conversation I had with my special guest, Mr. Keith Rivers, President of Pasquotank County NAACP. Mr. Rivers, welcome to Around Town with Hez Brown. Glad to see you. Glad to have you.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. And it's a pleasure to be on your show and at WRVS 89.9.
Wonderful. So we will start out by giving you an opportunity to tell us a little bit about yourself. What is your status? Are you married? Do you have children?
Mr. Brown, I'm a retired Naval Chief Petty Officer of 21 years. I reside here in Elizabeth City, North Carolina, this great place. I do have two children. I have one that is in law school, and I have another one that is in the third grade here at J.C. Sawyer Elementary School. I'm married and happily married, and I hope she's listening, for 26 years. And I am as you stated earlier, I am the local president of the Pasquotank branch of the NAACP. I've also recently, as of October, been elected as the North Carolina third vice president of the state conference of the NAACP.
Congratulations on being elected to the third vice president of WCP. I think that gives us in Pasquotank County a little bit more vision, a little bit more power, and we get probably more information when you're on the top staff. So congratulations on that position. Now I know that you retired from the military, and I want to congratulate you too for serving our country for the time that you did, and for 21 years. That's a whole part of your life is to serve. But I want to say congratulations. I want to say also too thank you, because Veterans Day is coming up and soon, so we want to thank you in advance for your service. Now, being retired from the military, it means that you probably have a lot of free time, and mean that you don't do too much. So what do you do with your free time that you have now?
He said a lot of free time. Well, also earlier, I do take care of and manage a 60-bed community, assisted living community, where I take care of persons that have diagnosis of dementia. And I try to stay involved in community service. I believe that service is the rent that we pay for room on this earth, as Shirley Chisholm said it. And the more involved we are, and the more that we can disseminate information, that's why this program is such a great program, because the Bible does say that our people are destroyed for their lack of knowledge. And anytime we can gain knowledge and we can disseminate that knowledge and information to our friends, our community, it empowers us. And the more knowledge we have, the more empowered we are. And the more empowered we are, the better decision-making skills that it gives us as adults, and also our children.
You say you manage an institution where people are suffering from dementias, which I think is something that's very, very tragic. And as we get older, I shouldn't say we, as I get older, and I'm around a lot of elderly people from time to time, and this is something that seemed to be really a tragedy that's happening to the older people. What do you attribute that to? Maybe you don't know or you don't know, but if you're working in the field, maybe you can shed some light to the audience on that briefly.
Many times it seems that, and sometimes it's sad to say, that many times economics go hand in hand when it comes to treatment and the resources that are available for elderly persons. We sometimes forget that when we talk about Medicaid, for example, Medicaid takes care of elderly persons and poor children. Those are the biggest consumers of Medicaid. And sometimes when you live in a congressional district such as ours, which is one of the poorest in the nation, many elderly persons only have their Social Security. Many times information, once again, we go right back to the knowledge part. Sometimes we're in a rural area, and many elderly persons and their families are not privileged to a lot of information and resources that they could utilize. We had the hospital in Belhaven that closed down. People in that geographical area now have to travel as far as 45 minutes for medical care.
Wow.
So imagine if you're living there and you break your arm, or your child has a seizure. It's a 45-minute drive to the hospital, and it's about the same if the rescue squad has to come and pick you up and take you there. So, and Alzheimer's is affecting our community in record numbers, and maybe someday I can come back and do a piece on dementia, Alzheimer's, vascular dementia, and an educational piece, and talk about some resources that are available in our community.
You know, I'm going to hold you to that, because I'm saying that, again, I just want to just be repetitive with that. The older I get, and my wife sometimes accuses me already being in the early stages of that, but by the same token, I'm saying that that's some information that we need to know in our community, because if you can detect it at an early stage of your life, there are some medications that you can take for that. I think that's correct.
There is.
To slow it down.
Well, there are many different types of dementia. We're just, as a community, very aware of Alzheimer's. But, you have vascular dementia, which can be brought on by stroke. Probably the easiest way to describe dementia is memory loss. And usually it's memory loss that's not going to come back. Alzheimer's is very progressive. But there are things that you can do early on. There's still a lot of if is the biggest language in Alzheimer's dementia, because they do research and they find certain things that you could do early in your life maybe to prevent it. There are some medications that you can take, but it's more of a style of living. It's more how your loved ones address your quality of life, and that's what you're looking for, because Alzheimer's is a very progressive disease, and usually it's not going to get better as of right now, but there's a lot of research going on. And so, yes, an educational piece on how to deal with it. Your loved one, sometimes you can be getting mad at your loved one, and you think that they're telling you that they need to go home and cook dinner for their children, and the children are not at home. They're all grown, and then you're telling your father, your mother, well, look, that there are no kids at home, but in their mind, their children are at home. But yes, that is something that is very much needed in our community.
And again, I think that is enough for us to get you back to talk about that, because it is so prevalent that we have this kind of information, which unfortunately, one of the reasons for this program is because there's shortage of information in the community. The only resource that we have to get information in our community is through the Daily Advance or through WRVS that pertains to our community. But most of what we do on this program is talk about things that pertain to our community in a sense, and getting information. Now, let me just roll back a little bit and back to the NAACP. Then we're going to get into some other discussion about the school and about politics and all those things during our time. So now, how long have you been president of the local chapter?
I've been president in Pasquotank County going into my 11 years now. I was the district director prior to my election as the state third vice president for 6 years. That district included what we call District 12, which is Gates County, Currituck County, Camden County, Pasquotank County, Chowan County, and Paquemmons County. And so that I was there for 6 years and president, and I'm still the current president, and I'm in my 11th year.
Is the president of the chapter a paid position?
No, we're volunteers.
Yeah. The reason I asked that question, because, there are people who believe because of the time you have to invest in terms of making it a solid chapter and building a chapter, people believe that you get paid for it. You don't get paid.
We do not get paid. From the in the organizational level of the NAACP, state presidents and below do not get paid. Reverend Barber did not receive a paycheck. Many of us, most of us, and all of us believe in justice. And when you believe in something strongly enough, it's something that you involve yourself in. Once again, it's serving. The NAACP is an organization that people that are involved, they believe in service in the name of justice, whether it's educational, social, economic. We're there to alleviate all forms of discrimination. I'm glad you asked that, Mr. Brown, because one thing that the NAACP many times gets the overall the perception is that it's a black organization. However, NAACP is an organization of justice, and Lady Liberty is colorblind. And it's just that if it's African Americans, blacks, whichever term that you want to use, are the ones that are being inflicted with the injustices, then that tends to be why maybe it has that perception. But here in North Carolina, we are the second largest state conference in the nation, and North Carolina is only about 21% African American. So our state conference is very diverse. Even now here in Pasquotank County, in the recent months, we have a lot of whites that come to our meetings, and we're also looking to reach out to Hispanics in this area, because many of the same problems, such as Alzheimer's and the ability to get out accurate information, it's not only affecting African American community, but it's affecting many of your poor whites, your Hispanic communities, and they lack from this type of information.
And I know that there's a chapter on campus, ECSU campus. I'm just thinking, one of the things that happen and such as happening in our churches, we have very few young people, and most of the churches are around Pasquotank County, but in other places too. We don't have that many. Is a vibrant chapter on campus? Do we have a good leadership preparing to move into other positions at some point in some time with the chapter on campus?
Yes, but they have a great chapter on campus. I was with the president last night. We attended a meeting. They have been very active in going to county commissioner meetings, city council meetings. They voiced one of their concerns is asking the county and the city to support a resolution in the removal of the monument, the Confederate monument that bears the Confederate flag, from the courthouse lawn onto private property. The numbers are growing. And I'm also can take a little privilege. My daughter last year was the president here on campus for 2 years, and actually she's a third generation president, and she was also president of the state, second vice president of the state youth and conference. So we do have from the state level, we have a college and youth division where we are trying to groom young adults and young children in a path that they can also become recipients of information and knowing how to fight, knowing that it's okay to fight and stand up for what you believe in. But a lot of times, many people want to fight, many people want to get involved, but they don't know how. And that's one of the things that we do here at the university. And as the local president, I always try to work with the youth, with the college chapter president in just advising and answering any questions or just being a resource for them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you raised the issue about the statues and monuments that's being asked to not only here but across the country to be removed. And I believe I'm correct in stating that the city council passed a resolution supporting that, and the one that did not support that is the county commissioners. Is that correct? Did they give any reason or rationale for not supporting them? Because I think that under the law, that they can't change it. It's only going to be changed on the state level, and you were only asking for them to give you a resolution of support.
And that's correct. The city council did pass it in a unanimous vote. And they also asked the county commissioners. And what we were asking the county commissioners to do is to support a resolution that Pasquotank County would be in favor of removing the monument from public property, that they will support Governor Cooper's move and legislative push to have these monuments, to have that law, as you spoke of, taken away so that local authorities or local governments could actually remove these monuments from public property. And I think, Mr. Brown, it's important to let the community know, because there's a lot of conversation around why it should not be removed. You know, that it is a heritage, that it commiserates the dead of the Confederacy. And the NAACP's position in Pasquotank County is clear. We are not arguing what the monument means to each and every individual. Our position is that it is offensive to 38% of Pasquotank County, which is the African American population of this county. And we have seen that throughout American history, anytime something is offensive to a large segment of people, that it is taken out of the public sector, i.e. prayer in schools. You know, schools, because of the legal ramifications, schools do not allow prayer. You know, it's for note, you can't wear a Confederate flag in the public school system. You can't drive on a military installation with a Confederate flag on your car. It's important to note that when things are offensive, such as sexual harassment, if being a Navy veteran, you know, if a female walks into an area and says that our conversation is inappropriate, it offends her, regardless of what you and I believe, we have to stop that conversation. And then we have to move on. And what we've been advocating to the county commissioners, that this monument is offensive, and it's on public property where all people pay taxes, and it does bear the Confederate flag. Our previous governor, Governor McCory, actually took the flag down over the Old North building in Raleigh. The NAACP has had a multi-year campaign in South Carolina to remove the Confederate flag from their state capitol building. And after the tragic shooting that took place in Emmanuel Church, they now have removed that flag. And so we're asking here in Pasquotank County to do the same. However, the county commissioners, in a 4-3 vote, chose not to remove the monument, and not even to do a resolution in support of removal of the monument.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I know that has become an issue that's really affecting the entire country. As a matter of fact, it became an issue in the Virginia race, but it wasn't it was not effective as they thought it would be, because the Republican candidate said that it should not be removed, and the governor-elect, took a firm position that they all should be removed. And I don't know if that attribute to him being elected or not, but it was a position that he took that I think that was well received by those in the African American community.
And it's and when you look at most of these monuments, they were actually erected many years after the Civil War. They were erected in the 1910s, 1911, 1912, during that time period when Jim Crow laws were running rampant throughout the South. Those laws that gave blacks a different set of rules and regulations. And, sometimes, Mr. Brown, we forget that African American men could vote. Most people forget that the 15th Amendment to the Constitution, only a couple of years at the ending of the Civil War, African American men could vote. And there was a great coalition of whites and blacks working together The 13th Amendment abolished slavery. The 14th Amendment gave citizenship. And many times the slaves were working in the fields, but poor whites were working in the fields right beside them. And they formed something at the end of slavery called fusion politics. And North Carolina is right at the forefront when you look at Wilmington, North Carolina, and the Wilmington riots. And for those listeners, if you've never read about or heard about the Wilmington riots, Google them, and you will find out that Wilmington was what they called a fusion town. We had as many, if not more, black legislators in Washington, D.C. during that time period than we ever had before. And once the South moved out when the Union troops moved out of the South is when the Klan rose and white supremacy became the law of the land. When Louisiana passed the grandfather clause, which said that if you were a former slave or a descendant of a slave, you could no longer vote. And that's when these laws ran. And then when the Union troops poured out of the South, that's what caused this big push of white supremacy. And this is the Confederate flag that we see today. These are when these monuments were erected to send out a message to African Americans that, listen, the law may no longer allow you to be in slavery, but everything you do after that is really going to be what we call modern day slavery, which is Jim Crow. And these monuments are a constant reminder, and which we see that times have changed now in America. We're seeing more and more hate crimes. After the election of President Obama, hate crimes just shot out of the roof. Throughout this country, we've seen Charlottesville, Virginia. We've seen these other areas where Emmanuel Church, and we have to send a message out in our community and to our children of all races that we can live in one world together, because we don't have a choice. If North Korea gets kind of pumped up over there, what are we going to do in America? Are we going to worry about whether I'm white or black? And what's the mission? And that's one of the great lessons that you learn in the military. In the military, you may have your own personal views, but we are put into positions where we have to put the mission first, because we are codependent on each other. And I just hope at some point our county commissioners can see the error in their ways, and that they will be able to look back and be on the right side of history. Don't be like the Bull Connors, the George Wallaces, the ones that had a great resistance to progress, to doing what is right, to doing what is just. And so I have faith that they will see it and that they will move forward. And we're going to continue to show up at county commissioner meetings, and we're going to continue to request that they do this resolution to remove that monument that bears the Confederate flag and the words "Our Heroes" from the courthouse lawn, from the building that offers justice.
Okay. One last question on the monuments. Is that the only solution, is to remove them? Is there any gray areas that can be discussed or talked about?
Well, a lot of times a compromise comes up. Well, how about if we put up a monument of Martin Luther King? Well, I think that's a disservice, because Martin Luther King stood in the name of justice. If the Confederacy was living today, they would be considered ISIS. They were fighting, their whole basis was the continuation of slavery. To not remove them and put them in their proper place, courthouse lawns, the middle of cities, those are public places. Those are places where all individuals have to go. And in our position, there is no compromise. They need to be moved to their rightful place. And I tell you, Mr. Brown, was so ironic if somebody was walking down the street and they were a neo-Nazi group and they were wearing the swastika, blacks and whites would look out and say, that's wrong. They shouldn't have that. There's no way, there's no place in our society for that. However, that didn't even have anything to do with American justice. That happened in Europe, but it's not tolerated because of the atrocity that happened to the Jews. And when you go back and look at the atrocities of slavery, the atrocities of the Jim Crow era, when you look at the Emmett Tills, when you look at African Americans being killed and hung, the entire foundation of the NAACP was built around lynching. It was to find a legal remedy to the lynchings that were taking place. And so that monument is a constant reminder to some of the past and to others that it's okay to have a practice of discrimination, and it's not.
Okay. Let's pause for a moment. We'll be right back with more Around the Town with Hez Brown.
The ECSU Continuing Education Program offers courses in professional development, technology, and personal enrichment. Find classes in a variety of subjects such as Microsoft Word and Excel, web design, animation, unmanned aircraft systems, and many others. For a complete listing and more information, contact Dr. Michael Jasper at 252-335-3713 or find us online at www.ecsu.edu. Elizabeth City State University, come to discover, leave to conquer.
You are now listening to Around the Town with Hez Brown.
All right, let's just move on to you. And I know that Reverend Dr. William Barber, it is still such a tremendous force, not only in North Carolina, but throughout the country and probably throughout the world. It just does me just pleasure to see him on television articulating the position of the NAACP and the position of all. And I know that he is probably in the transitional period now, that he's no longer going to be the state president. And I just asked the question, some people can be replaced and some cannot be replaced. Somebody else can take the position. Do you think that he can be replaced? I mean, he had such energy, such vigor, and the guy he just could articulate our position so well until it just have you in a trance to listen to what he has to say, because he said better than we say it.
And I'm so glad you brought that up, Mr. Brown. First of all, to tell you that Reverend Barber is a local homeboy. Reverend Barber's from Plymouth, North Carolina. And he has transitioned now he's no longer our state conference president. Our new state conference president by election is Reverend Anthony T. Spearman. But the one thing, the NAACP is not built around any one person. That's one of the reasons why we have been around for so long. Since 1909, is because the structure of the NAACP is built around the organization, not any one individual. It's just that here in North Carolina, we had the unique pleasure to serve with a gentleman with Reverend Dr. Barber, who has just transcended, who is God-given. I don't think that, he's one of those leaders that come around maybe once every 50 years. I often say that I never had the chance to march with Dr. King. I never had the chance to hear Malcolm X. I never had the opportunity to sit on a bus with Rosa Parks, but I did have the opportunity to go to jail with Dr. King, with Dr. Barber, to march with Dr. Barber, to serve with Dr. Barber, and he will, his legacy is written, it will be rewritten, and right now it is continuing forward. He is now working with an organization called Barriers of the Breach, which is a nationwide organization that is training ministers in civil rights. He's also going forward with the Poor People's Campaign, which is something that Dr. King was pushing forward right before his death, which is to bring light to what's going on across this country and to bring to focus on poor people, to focus on economics. So There can't be another Dr. Barber, but the NAACP in North Carolina is still strong and well.
Okay. Now let's go to just go to another area. And as I said again, we as people, the world is really made up of what I said, 95% followers and 5% leaders. And everybody in a leader's position is not leaders. They're there. But those leaders come far and few. And I just say that Dr. Barber fell well within that range of the 5% of real, what I consider leaders. Because leaders are people, in order to be a leader, you have to be able to persuade people to follow what you're doing. Now, if you're a leader and you don't have nobody behind you, then you just hold a position, you're not a leader. So let's just turn, I wanted to talk a little bit about gerrymandering and redistricting, but I think I'm going to skip that. And I think what I need to talk about now is the school district, because I know the local chapter has been a strong advocate and really challenging the school district and some of the decisions that's being made about our children. And so let me just raise this question with you. There is a lot of discussion, and I've been hearing this since I live here now, and that is the fact that children, the reason some of our kids, particularly African-American kids, are failing is because they're coming from poverty-stricken homes. What is your take on that?
Education and economics have seemed to always kind of go hand in hand. For example, the students at Duke University are not smarter than the students at UNC Chapel Hill. They're just richer. The kids at Harvard are not smarter than the students at Duke University. They're just richer. And when we use the word poverty and we take it outside of, and we use it as an excuse why we are not educating the children, then that's wrong. Children that come from maybe a lesser economic bracket, or they live in poverty, does not mean that they do not have the ability to learn at a high capacity. It just means they might have different barriers. And when we don't address that, when we treat everything as the whole and we are not looking at the individual, then that creates a problem. And it's very easy to say that, oh, well, I can't teach that child because that child comes from a poverty-stricken background, and that's why my school is failing. No, that's not why the school is failing. And we need to sometimes maybe get away from that terminology, because the school is not failing. The children are failing. The children are not meeting a certain criteria that will give them the ability to function in life. When you look across this nation, and African American community is the hardest hit. When you're talking about 14%, only about 14% of black fourth graders across this nation are proficient in both math and reading. That's a problem. That's a problem. And you can almost equate prisons and education hand in hand. And when I use the term education, I'm not just talking about children that go to college or go on to become doctors and get master's degrees, but we're talking about children that have to grow up and have basic functioning skills to be able to exist in a community and be a productive, thriving citizen. Everybody's not going to go to college. Truth be told, I didn't graduate and get my degree until the year 2010, and that does not mean that I was not capable of doing the work, but my priorities at that time were other things. And however, upon my completion of my military service, I went back to college and I got my degree, and I graduated from this great and proud university, and I graduated with a 3.89.
Viking pride.
Viking pride.
Okay, so let's take a snapshot of Elizabeth City school system itself. As it stands now, there are 6 what they call low-performing schools, and you separate the schools. You said low schools with kids not performing at a certain level. What do you attribute that to, in a sense, and what can be done to improve those schools? Do you have any ideas, any thoughts, any suggestions, or what should the school district be doing to do this? Because it's affecting our children more so than anyone else.
And you know, that's a good question, Mr. Brown. First, I'm not an educator, but however, I do know that drastic things require drastic measures. The one thing that we do not want to do is the community to fight with the school system or the school administration. And in the process of the fight, you know, there's an old saying that says when 2 elephants fight, the only thing that gets trampled is the grass. And in this case, that grass is the children. So we must remember that this conversation, everything that we're doing is about educating the children. Now, one thing that we believe in the NAACP here in Pasquotank County is that, first of all, there has to be a level of accountability. If our schools are not failing, it's very easy for an administrator or someone in charge to say, well, you know, we need to have more meetings. We need to do this. Well, first of all, let's identify the problem. Why are our children failing? What are they failing in? You know, we need to identify they're failing in reading. Then what are you doing to put programs in to help these children read? If the low area is mathematics, what programs are you putting in to help these children become proficient in mathematics? Instead of having a lot of lingo and a lot of, as I like to say, boss talk, get right down to the root of the problem. We are a low performing district, which means over 55% of our schools are in a failing status, which means that we have significant problems. Central Elementary is in one of those categories, is considered a low performing school. You know, where was the 5th grade math teacher? Did that contribute to not having licensed teachers in the schools? You know, do we have a problem maintaining veteran teachers? You know, anytime you bring in new to anything, there's always going to be a semi drop off when you don't have that wisdom that's already there. You know, we're losing veteran teachers in our community in record numbers. We're losing math teachers.
Why is that, do you know?
Well, you know, and I can only look at it from an external view because, like I said, I am not an educator. I'm not in the school system. But I think some has to do with the environment in which they are working. Some of the teachers that I have spoken with, they don't feel as though that they are being given the freedom to be able to teach the student because they're more teaching to a test. I do know here that in Pasquotank County, we introduced a program last year, or the superintendent introduced a program, the Learning Focus. And we're wondering if that had anything to do with, because we had 4 low performing schools as of last year. This year we dropped to 2 we added 2 more, to that number. And then one of our D schools dropped to an F school. And we were, wondering if the change to this, learning focus had anything to contribute to that. Teachers, veteran teachers, well, we do know that North Carolina, on the pay scale for teachers, they have mangled that budget, for lack of better words. They've shredded it to shreds when it comes to teacher pay in North Carolina. You know, a teacher with 10 years experience in North Carolina makes somewhere around $38,000 a year.
Yeah. You know, since you said that, you know, I do know that North Carolina, as you say, you're losing veteran teachers, and I'm fully aware of that many states come to North Carolina to recruit teachers because of the pay scale. A whole large number of teachers who left North Carolina to go to places like Texas by walking out of North Carolina into Texas, that they receive $15,000 more than they're making here. I do know that in Norfolk, Virginia, I talked to some folks who were recruiting teachers for Norfolk. And just driving to Norfolk, they was paying $7,000 more a year. And I said again, I'm trying to see, we can always identify the problem, but we have to also look for solutions. And one of the things that I think that is part of this problem is the money that's being drawn away from the school district itself. Just on the Department of Instructions alone, since 2009, have reduced the budget by 2018. It would be somewhere around $12.9 million in terms of instructional for students. So I'm saying that department been kind of chopped way over in half. It's a few people there now. So I'm saying so it's some things that we have to do. Just along on a local level, but some things we have to do on a state level too, to try to raise the awareness level of really what's happening to our children, and by taking the funds away and not paying the teachers adequate salaries, it's part of the problem itself too. That's just my own biased opinion about that. But I just think that there are some things that we can do, because I've been watching. Is there any groundswell from the community to say, wait a minute, we're just not going to tolerate this? Is there any groundswell do you see from your perspective?
And again, I'm glad you brought that up. We went to when the numbers came out, or when it was publicized that we were a low performing district, we addressed the Pasquotank School Board, or the Board of Education, and we asked them that because the superintendent has to submit a plan to the state office and to the State Education Committee in Raleigh. And we asked them, well, before you submit your plan, why not bring it before the public for public input, for community help? They've now put it on the website, and they are allowing written responses and communication up till November the 17th. However, we've also requested that they take it a step further, that they hold community forums so they can get this type of input, so they can ask questions. Because see, when you have transparency, that's the first step in everybody having buy-in. When people feel as though that they have buy-in, that they have some type of input into the solutions. I don't think there's any one solution. I mean, we have there's so many tangible moving parts to this. But when people feel as though that they have buy-in, then people tend to get more involved. We know what makes good schools. We know what can turn around schools. We know that you have to have good leadership, first of all. You have to have community involvement and demographics. Okay. And that means making sure that schools are balanced adequately in student population. And that's not just by color. That's not just by economics. But we know that if you have a group of third graders and 60% of them are failing, and you give them to one school, and I hate to use the word failing, I'm sorry, but that are not reaching proficiency, and you put them all in one school, and then you say, well, these children can't learn, or these children are not learning because they're coming from poverty. Well, guess what? Maybe first it started at how we viewed it from the administrative standpoint of view. And you have to, just like the plan that's being submitted, people that are not educators, not everybody will sit down and write a letter in on their improvements. They might not even understand the plan. And it may sound simple to an educator or to an administrator that wrote the plan, but to the average parent, it might be difficult. I mean, my wife and I are both college graduates, and my daughter came home with a third grade math problem, and And we had to go out to the school to ask the teacher, how do we do this third grade math problem? So when you say, well, parent involvement, what are you talking about parent involvement? But I think that if first in Pasquotank County, from the school board to the superintendent, when they stand up and accept accountability, and this is in any management type position or authority where you're in charge, you first must accept accountability. Then you must look at all your moving parts and see how you can include them. We would have no need for this radio show if everybody read the newspaper. Okay. But everybody doesn't read the newspaper. Some people learn better by hearing. Some people learn better by doing. Sometimes when people do surveys, if you've ever done a survey and you crunch all the data, the numbers will show you one thing. But when you can really learn what your problems are and how to fix them are usually from the comments on the survey, because they tend to get to the root of the problem. The people who are closest to the problem usually have the solutions. I listen a lot of times when we say, oh, we need to do this for young people. We need to help young people. And nobody ever takes time to ask the young people, what is it that you need? What is it that will do best? I've talked to some teachers who are very, very successful. And two of the three teachers that I talked to were both math teachers, not here in Pasquotank County. One was in Greensboro and another was in Jacksonville, Florida. And they both teach inner city math, Algebra 1, Geometry, and Algebra 2. The teacher in Florida, she is in the top 5% of teacher scores of proficiency in the state, and she's been that way for some years. And she says one thing that she does, the first week and a half of school, she doesn't teach her students anything. She talks to her students. She gets to know her students. She reassures her students that she is there for them and that she cares about them, because she says once those students find out that you care about them, they are receptive to anything you lay out. Now it's about the teaching methods. And she said that's one thing that she's found, that children that come from a poverty background, regardless of color, that once they understand that you care about them, that you have their back, so to speak, that then they are receptive. And when she told me that, and when the teacher in Greensboro told me that, the first thing I reflected back to was athletics. Coaches can get young men and women, regardless of color, to do whatever they want them to do, because most players believe in their coach. You can play football and 40 years later, you can walk down the street and see your coach, and you still call them coach.
And respect them. Okay. I think that we have to stop there. This has been very, very informational, and I'm sure that that we could go on and on for another couple of hours and still learn some more. But I just wanted to thank you for taking the time out to come to share the information. And I certainly hope that we can do this again. We're going to talk about the dementia and those kind of things. But I think we need to talk about one other thing, too, because I think that the thing that bothers me is the information we already have. We don't use it. For example, we know now that they build prisons based on looking at how kids are progressing in the third grade. And that's how they build prisons. So I think we need to even talk about that a little bit more, because we know who the prisons are full of.
Yes.
So we need to talk about that too. But thank you for your time, and this has been quite informational. And so please agree to come back again before you leave.
And I will. And thank you again, Dr. Brown. And just one last note. Parents, friends of parents, clergy, motivate your friend that's a parent if they're not going to the school. If the parents are not getting involved, if the community is not getting involved, if our churches are not getting involved, then why do you think the student is not engaging? Encourage them. We are our brothers and sisters' keepers. We can give all the statistics, all the data. We can talk all day and night about how our African-American children are not performing. But if we are not making the efforts that we need to make, the work is not done. Reverend Barber has moved on from the North Carolina NAACP in leadership, but he knows that the work is not done. And we have to remember, if you're retired, you have time. Go out to the schools. Be a consistent lunch buddy. Be a consistent lunch buddy. Just your presence, eating with students at lunchtime. Watch how they come in and just flock around you and want to know who you are. And I guarantee if you do it once a week, every week for the same day, those children will come to you and they will talk to you about things that they will tell nobody else. And so you, as one individual, can make a difference. And that might be the one child that you can look 15 years from now that's not in jail, that's not in our criminal justice system. And it's all because you took 1 hour a week and went to a school and ate lunch. So instead of giving your $20 to McDonald's, give your $2 to one of our local schools and be a lunch buddy. And again, thank you, Mr. Brown, and your show is well received and well needed.
Thank you very much. All right.
Thank you for listening to Around the Town with Hez Brown, recorded and produced at WRVS-FM Studios on the campus of Elizabeth City State University. If you are interested in becoming an underwriter for this show, call 252-335-3985.